Welcome back to the With Joey B podcast. Interesting one for you today, Luke, as we continue with Alan Watts and how he predicted the education revolution over 50 years ago. So remember, the thing I find impressive about this guy, he died in 1973, and it's hard for me to figure out exactly when he said everything he said, but we know that everything was before 73. Now, the thing that's come up with these three big thinkers we've talked about so far is this idea of abstractions away from reality. We are often educated from unreality because these systems become entrenched and they lose touch with the rest of it. So I think about this, the concept I want to introduce first is this maybe metaphorical image of an island. And it's almost like reality or the real world, as I know that can be ambiguous to define, but whatever that is, that's like the mainland, right? And it feels like education, the way we've designed it, has become this, as probably you can say about other things, maybe religions, maybe politics in certain instances, has become like this bit that has broken off from the mainland and has become this island. And the idea is to like go to this island to learn how to survive on the mainland because you can't last there. And then you're supposed to go back one day, right? To like the real fruits of life. Except so often we just get caught on this island because we think there's more and more we need to do before we go back to the mainland, and it just gets scarier and scarier to go back there. We get attached to and familiar with the way of life on the island, and the mainland becomes this unknown. This is the idea I want to propose to unpack what I think Watts is saying. So if you remember, education, he says, should just be letting people into adult life. It should not be this idea of preparation, because once it becomes about preparation, it gets easy to keep selling. Like, oh, you're not good enough yet after you've done this degree. You need postgraduate study. And oh, it looks like you're not good enough. You've failed. Here's, more a tuition for another semester that you need to pay to redo that subject. This is the dangerous trap when it becomes about preparation. You can keep selling people on stuff. And you can say, this is what's happening on the other side. People are geared towards the outcome, basically. All so now I'm going to quote him again because he has some very powerful phrases. So remember this when we talk about reality. We need an education which brings us back to nature in the sense not of the birds and bees and flowers, but of being focused on the material present. This is where you live, and this is what you have to deal with to be able to live richly in that situation. Does that make sense, Luke? To you? What are you saying there?
To me, it does. It's just a very, very colorful way of saying we can't appreciate things. We don't really have the ability to appreciate things sometimes when it's all right. It's realistically right in front of you, the day-to-day moments. That's pretty much what I took from it.
I think he's saying that. Plus, like, if you lived in the 1970s, it would have been different, right? That would have been your material present. So he's saying you should be able to live there. Whatever, if there was problems, right? So now our material present is there's COVID, right? There's whatever's happening, right? Financially, or there's a lot of comfort otherwise. That's our material present. He's saying whatever the material present is, whatever it really is, you should be able to appreciate what you can about. And that's where what you said, I think, comes in. Be able to actually appreciate what you can about it. Again, there will always be something wrong if you want to find a reason wrong.
Yeah.
Always be ways it could be better in theory, sure. But he's saying that is what he means by nature, not kumbaya, jumping and flying around in fields of flowers and lying on the grass all day. Nature is this is natural. Things have turned out this way, not to be in some distraction from it. Again, not to be in the island. Whatever the mainland happens to be, negotiating that. So I'll go on. People are looking for ways of living whereby they don't live this fragmented, abstract work life that is completely cut off from all the rest of their truly human associations. So we are facing a very big revolution in which our young people want to return to reality. And even though what they do may make very little money, it will at least have the satisfaction of being an actual relationship to the real world in which we live now. I don't know I don't know what is the detailed answers to all that, but this is what is coming. It will be very disruptive of things as we know, but better by far. Better by far. Live in contact with the actual here and now than to live a life of perpetual suspense. The powerful phrase. Than to live a life of perpetual suspense, waiting for a gorgeous thing that is going to turn up, but never, never does.
It's pretty powerful.
This is big. This is big. I was at coffee with a very good mentor almost a year, last year sometime. And she brought to my attention this book when I was talking about the conscious student, as obviously I talk about it as the concept of what's to come. Any impact from it will be more than whoever gets to be involved in it directly. It symbolizes what's changing. And explain the concepts behind it, right? And she looked at Scott and myself, and she mentioned this book called The Fourth Turning, about history cycles and how every 4 generations there's kind of a revolution and the emergence of a new kind of social order. Once the cycle eventually wears out and people get over the way life has become, they change and upgrade it. She goes, your generation is going to be a generation of builders. Something I forgot to say in the previous episode is that we are, the thing that has been poorly defined is that we were the first generation to grow up with this internet thing. And we've talked a lot about the technological change, but we haven't talked about the change in identity. That it forces you, put it this way, Luke, 50 years ago, you and I, born 50 years earlier than we had, would be just whatever, blazing down whatever corporate pathway we could right now. Right? There's be no podcast. It'd be very rare that we do this sort of deep reflection on things as we go. Very rare. Right? This is what's changed with the internet. Internet has forced us, because of how much information there is and how many different options there are, forces us to be more reflective. Right? So this is why forcing that conflicts with the systems we have, which is already, I see it with people like you and other community members and young people I follow, whose journeys I follow with keen interest. And you can see that urge for more. You can see it. And that's going to build up. And at some point, the default thinking that this is what you should do after high school is not going to be the same, because our generation, even the ones who went through the same systems, right, graduate pathways and university and everything like that, won't be like militant against it, but we won't be as pushy on it as our parents' generation was. There's just no way, because we would have seen more and more examples of people who were quite, did whatever well despite uni or not. And this is going to be very different, because then what comes after that story of what comes after, which most people have been pushed into without thinking, of getting on again, it's coming. All right. The next thing to chase is my getting a mortgage and a promotion and an investment property. And to not just automatically go into that, but go into it more consciously now, which will get more and more common, is going to shift the way we think about work and life. Because there's been this weird category opened up between 18 and 28, where instead of getting married straight away at 23 after you finished university, like say Gilly was partner at a law firm and married at the age of 23 and 9 months and had a mortgage. Because don't forget, property was lower barrier to entry to property back then.
Yeah.
Now people are going to be thinking more about the experiences they want to have 18 to 28. They already are. It's like, hang on, why wouldn't I travel for my youth? Right? Or why wouldn't I do this and that? Or why wouldn't I be creative and take risks? So I don't know how the hell Alan Watts, way back then, before the internet and everything, predicted this sort of thing. But we know with a high degree of certainty that this is coming. If not, we're in the very early start of it. I mean, you've got in Asia this movement of, they call it lying flat or standing. So I can't remember what it is, lying down, where these young people have been indoctrinated with such an aggressive education system in parts of China and other parts of Asia are getting, into the age of like 24, like the classic, now it's time for the workforce, looking what's involved in their work and what you get for all that like brutal hard work and thinking this is not worth it. We don't like this story. We don't like these options. So we're going to lie flat. Like we're going to not do anything and deal with the consequences, even if it's less money, because we don't like that. And it's becoming less and less appealing, like more and more unappealing rather over time. And this is things already happening. There's a CNN article on that movement in Asia, right? So that's, then there's the West is incredibly powerful, and he really called it. And that line strikes me: rather than to live a life of perpetual suspense, waiting for a gorgeous thing that is going to turn up, but never does.
It's a full-on line, but it's true. Like at times, I would say before I've ever made a change, or you feel like that, or that goes through your head, and you're like, you change direction because you're like, well, what am I? This is completely pointless. Or you just have that realization. But that's pretty much putting words to that feeling that I've had in the past.
Me too.
It's like when you realize, hang on a minute, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
Nothing will change unless I, change the actions that I do on a day-to-day basis, and puts me on another trajectory.
Exactly. And not just that, there's this, when I read Steve Martin, the comedian actor's biography, and the end story at the end is how he goes back to where he started out, the old club where he used to do stand-up, where he was struggling. Sometimes no one would show up and he'd just perform anyway, audience of none, just perform anyway, empty theater. And he goes back and he feels so nostalgic after. He's in so much like pain. He's like, I realize I long to be back there. I long to be back there to that kind of hard times before he'd made it, before he knows he's going to make it and be in all the films, and, with all the money that comes and all the recognition and whatever, and all the adoration, he longed to be back there.
Mm.
So I was like, how can that story exist and be true? And for anyone like me to think, fuck, I just got to get through this for now because this is all going to be worth it one day. I think it's not saying that everything's daisies the way through, because it's certainly not for me, but it is meaningful every step of the way. There is joy, there should, like, sometimes I don't get to feel it, but there is joy on offer in each and every day, really. So it takes away the perpetual suspense without taking away the idea of working on things that matter long term and achievement and the right sort of goals.